Hello, everyone, and welcome to another great episode of the TopCyberPro podcast. I'm Jim West, founder and creator of TopCyberPro.com, and I got two great guys who just got back from Defcon. If anyone knows anything about Defcon, it's pretty much the Super Bowl of security, and they have people from all over the world that submit proposals and presentations. At least 3,000 proposals that get sent in. It is a super highly competitive vetting process to go through these and decide who makes the agenda. And these two gentlemen did. They had a very important presentation that they give, and then we're going to be talking about that later in the podcast. But without further ado, you guys know how I like to do this. I'd like to turn it over to my guests to introduce themselves, talk about what the work they do, and some fun facts about themselves, and we'll continue the discussion from there. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over first to Edward, and then after Edward, Mateo.
Hi, thanks for having us. So my name is Eduard. I used to work first as a web developer. I did that for 3 years. Then I got hired at KPMG Romania, where I worked as a senior penetration tester for 3.5 years. I had a lot of fun there. Since 2022, I started learning AWS security, and since then I was kind of hooked, and I started doing research. And yeah, this year we got the privilege to have a good enough research to present at Defcon.
Okay. Yourself, Mateo?
Fantastic, and thanks for having us, Jim. And yeah, well, I'm Matej Josephs, a senior security researcher. I've met Eduard at KPMG Romania, where we've also worked together on this piece of research, and we're lucky enough to be accepted at Defcon as well. In terms of my background, it's a bit mixed because I've studied criminology with psychology at university, which is completely off topic, although I did have some background in competitive programming. So it may be a bit misleading to only say that, hey, look, I'm a criminologist who jumped into cybersecurity. But now I also have my own company alongside my amazing wife. Our company is called HiveHack.
Okay. Could you maybe tell a little bit about what the company's goals, its mission is?
Yep, sure. So our company is pretty new at the moment. Our company aims to get the cybersecurity community together. So we're absolutely fascinated by the way bees work in colonies, so up to 60,000 bees. And the cybersecurity community is very, very similar. It's very important to work together for a goal, a common goal of the community. So we're working on this sort of area of training and inspiring people who start in cybersecurity. So
Excellent.
yeah, that's what we do at the moment.
Okay. Well, let's dive into, since we know we're talking about DEF CON, can you guys talk a little bit about the presentation? And if you're willing to share maybe some slides and some tidbits from that presentation, I'd love to see what you guys got.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think it's best to get a quick overview of the slides and talk through the presentation. Is that all right?
Yeah, so what I'll do is let me make you the host, and I believe you'll be able to pull up you'll be able to share your screen.
Yes. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Awesome. Let me just do a full screen here. Awesome. So we worked together on this research, and we had a bit of different areas of expertise. Although we worked together on the whole presentation, the whole research, and basically we saw in the environment of one customer, they had 5 public AMIs. I reported that. They said, yeah, it's a finding, but don't look into them. So I didn't, but I was curious what's inside the AMIs, right? Are there any secrets? Are there any sensitive files? I wanted to know. And I knew that if one company had 5 public AMIs, there must be others that have as well public AMIs. And an AMI is the image that is the image used when you create an EC2 instance. It's like the snapshot of a virtual machine. You can configure the volume of the virtual machine to have files, secrets, and whatever you want in terms of static files. And then you create new EC2 instances from that baseline, right? And yeah, they can be public or private. And the issue is when they are public, but you don't want them to be public, right? And we aim to search for secrets in all public AMIs, which quickly turned to be a lot of work. We checked some previous work. A lot has there 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 were some resources, right? When we started, we didn't check anything because we wanted to do this research by ourselves. But no one did it at the scale that we did or had the same focus as we did. So we set some goals. The main one was to dig for secrets. We had a starting point. I'm sorry, I think the Zoom, oh, never mind. We had a starting point. We collected all the images. We ended up with 3.1 million AMIs, which was a lot. We had to do some filtering, and we did the filtering based on the chances of images to have secrets, right? So we removed the AMIs from Marketplace, from AWS, and so on. So we were left with 26,000 AMIs, which was still a big number, but it was manageable, right? Here we have a distribution of the AMIs based on region. And this is what I mean when I say we collected the AMIs. So we have some information about who owns it, what is the snapshot, I mean the volume of the AMIs and so on. And yeah, now we had to find a way to access the AMIs. It had to be time and cost effective and automated, obviously. And we ended up not developing, but coming up with 4 options. And I will not go through the first 3 because the last one is the one we ended up using in the end. And essentially, we had to do a workaround. We had to start the AMI as an EC2 instance in our own AWS account, detach the volume, and reattach it to another EC2 instance that we already had running. So what we did was like having a working laptop and receiving a broken laptop, but we take out the hard disk and we connected it to our working laptop. So that was essentially what we did, but everything was done within the AWS environment. And this worked. It was hard to automate, but it worked. And we had a demo, but I think that's not relevant right now.
Yeah.
This is the high-level architecture we had in place. We had a master EC2 instance that we used to run the main script. And in every region, we started this secret searcher instance that we were able to connect to. And then we started batches of 20 public AMIs where we detach the volume from each instance, reattach it to the secret searcher where we scan them for secrets. And writing a lot of code, waiting a lot of time, and paying a bill of $450, which I thank KPMG Romania for that. We got 500 gigabytes of carefully selected data. And now Mateo can tell you more about what this data was. Mateo, do you want me to?
Yeah, you can keep sharing the slides. Yeah, I can just jump through that. Just generally speaking, for this section, I focused on the secret searcher. So in other words, our methods for searching for secrets, what sort of secrets we found, and what we were able to do with these sort of secrets. For our initial strategy, we wanted our best to be to keep it as simple as possible, avoid reinventing the wheel. For this, we decided to use TruffleHog as an initial tool. It's a very popular secret searching tool. However, it was quite slow and it provided loads of false positives, at least for our use case here. And the fact that it was slow was basically the main issue because, well, slow secret scanning meant that our EC2 instances ran longer, which in turn meant that our AWS bill would have been way higher. So we went back to the drawing board and used the Zen of Python for inspiration. And that's simple is better than complex, complex is better than complicated, and special cases aren't special enough to break the rules. So with this in mind, we reduced our scope and decided to only look for specific types of files or directories instead of generic secrets. So we wanted to look for environment secrets, secrets leaked within Git repositories, AWS credentials, SSH private keys, and just a few others. And for this, we ended up using a very simple tool, that is find. So again, simple is better than complex. So with this 6-liner, which is only a 6-liner because we wanted it to look good, it could have been a 1-liner, we were able to actually look for secrets. And as you can see, we skipped the program files and the Windows directories. We skipped everything above 25 megabytes, and we looked for a few specific types of files or directories. This could have been way wider, of course, but our aim here was to do a proof of concept and not to find everything which can be found within AMIs. Of course, we set up a few other automations as well, so some for verifying AWS credentials. We also used Git leaks for checking Git repos for secrets. We also had some other automations for validating keys, mostly based on key hacks, which is a great repository of methods for validating keys and credentials. And in the end, we were also left with a lot of manual work. So after our data collection phase, we had over 2 million potential generic API keys, over 100,000 potential AWS credentials, and you can see private keys, JWTs, Telegram API, Stripe, and so on and so forth. So you can probably see why we needed these automations set up. And out of the over 100,000 AWS credentials, only 120 or a bit over 120 of them were valid, out of which 20 were root. And this does not seem like a lot, but think about it this way. It means we had initial access in the AWS accounts of over 100 companies. That's quite something. So
Given
we had
also
some
your limited scope too, because if you had, opened up the floodgates to get even more secrets, you would have had more potentially compromising and root account access. So, I mean, given your limited, proof of concept, that's alarming.
Absolutely, and that was very, very surprising to us. And honestly, our first thought was, hey, what does this matter? Because we have access to 100 AWS accounts of whatever small boutique companies, and that's not actually the case, because we checked the contact information for most of these accounts where we had this sort of information, and we found some surprising results. Many of these companies were on the Fortune 500 list. Some of the most valuable ones were worth 200 billion and 50 billion. We found companies in telecom, which you guys definitely heard about, security and tech, and many other industries. And unfortunately, as of now, we're unable to disclose the exact names of the companies, but we are still working on getting the approvals for this. Of course, there was a bit of OSINT as well from our side, just to make sure that we are contacting the right companies and it's not just random data added to the contact information. And
If
in
I
most
could
cases,
interject right there,
yes,
and I know
please.
you guys are aware of what I'm about to say, but the people watching this might not be fully aware of what you just said. When it comes to being ethical within security, doing the right thing means sometimes you want to do the due diligence of contacting the appropriate business owners and stakeholders of those respective businesses instead of just blasting. Because these two guys could have easily threw up a bunch of logos of companies and did a whole, what I call the peacock show of like, oh, here's all these names, but they're not name dropping because that's not the goal here. The goal is security. And I give kudos to these guys because as a professional, as a experienced professional, these guys are handling it the proper way. So for those viewers that aren't fully aware of what how they're approaching this, they're approaching it the right way because a person with not the amount of experience or with the level of ethics that these guys are operating with would have just blasted out these companies. There had been so many news reports. They could be on Fox News, CNN, Daily Mail. They would have been all over all the news wires and having interviews galore talking about it if they wanted to drag these companies through the mud. So my hat's off to you two gentlemen for doing it the right way, keeping ethical standards and professional standards super high. So yeah, I just want to kind of interject there because again, for you as professionals, it's just what you do. It's part of day to day. But for the viewers that don't really understand, you guys could have capitalized on this type of analysis and reporting that you discovered through this research but you chose to do the right thing. So again, it's really hard in these days for people to want to, get, go viral and get famous by, tearing companies through the mud. But I have to, again, my hat's off to you guys. Class acts, gentlemen. So continue. Sorry.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank
Thank you, and we definitely appreciate it. And to be fair, when Eduard came up with this research idea initially and invited me on board, he had this Git repo where he had the sort of ideas jolted down, and one of them was exactly related to ethics. And yeah, to be honest, this was one of the most difficult parts, the responsible disclosure and actually finding the owners. This was painful, exhausting, awful, but in the end, it was fine because we ended up making the internet a bit of a safer place, we hope. And actually, for one of these companies, we're able to find a program on BugCrowd. So we were able to report this issue there. The company is on the Fortune 500 list, and it was great for us to get a critical vulnerability confirmed on BugCrowd. Unfortunately, we didn't make any money out of it because it's a vulnerability disclosure program, not a bug bounty program. But still, our aim was definitely not to make money out of this piece of research. Definitely, money is nice, but well, making the internet a safer place is even nicer. And yeah, many people.
We are waiting for our t-shirts.
Yes, exactly, for merch or stuff. But at the end of the day, we quickly skipped on to the next part because we found out this other thing, which I found a bit more interesting, and I like to call this story how we earned and lost $3 million in a week. For a bit of context, there is this Git repository on one of the AMIs, ran Git leaks on there, found a Stripe API key, and guess what? Did a balance check and found this 7-digit amount in the US dollar currency. So of course, our first thought was, let's check out the Stripe documentation and see how somebody would go about transferring the funds. And we found out that the amount is actually in cents. So just by reading the documentation, we realized it's not 3.1 million, instead is 31,000. So yeah, a bit of a joke here is that our conclusion is that you shouldn't read the documentation if you want to keep your money. Of course, only a joke, because we quickly moved on and contacted their security contact. And for a couple of weeks, all we got was radio silence, no response whatsoever. So we decided to prove a bit of impact, just show them what can be done with it, of course, without transferring funds out of their account. So what we did, got subscribed to their cheapest plan, which was $9.99 per month, saw the transaction from the API, did a refund call to the API, which was succeeded, and I also saw that the money was actually back in my account, so the transaction was reverted. So this is when we decided to get in touch with the CEO. So we found the CEO of the company, got in touch with him, let him know that there is some impact, and within hours he got back to us and thanked us for this, and put us in touch with the CTO and asked for more information. We provided a comprehensive report, and the CTO was happy with it, said, well, thanks for sharing the relevant information. We have made the AMIs private for now, and the keys will be replaced, which was great for us. We were able to move on with our research. However, 1 month later, I was sort of forced to remember this issue because, well, I was so excited about being able to do a refund that I completely forgot to cancel my subscription.
The subscription,
So,
yeah.
Yep, this is how they get you, actually.
Yeah.
You'll just forget about the subscription. You'll pay it next month as well. So, yeah, this is when I tried the refund call again, and guess what? It worked again. So they did not actually replace the keys as they said. So we were actually very, very disappointed to see that the issue was still not fixed over 1 month after we initially disclosed this issue. Yeah, now, of course, for Defcon, we showed a bit more impact. So for instance, using free AWS resources, like, I don't know, we had access to 100+ accounts. In theory, we could have ran this research for free. So instead of paying $450 or so, we could have used the resources in these victim accounts, so to speak, and do the research for free. Now, the other more profitable option would have been AWS-based ransomware for sure, which is sort of going back to your initial point of ethics and stuff. So typically when we think of ransomware, we think of these huge code bases with teams of developers. This is the Linux team, this is the Windows team, this is the defense evasion team. It's thousands and thousands of lines of code. Whereas here, with access to these accounts, once we have initial access, this one-liner could have done it all. So list all S3 buckets, download the data in the buckets locally, and remove everything from the buckets. And of course, this could have been prevented with MFA deletion of S3 buckets. But in most cases, based on our experience, clients don't tend to set that up. Now, funnily enough, profile 8 was actually a valid profile. So my adrenaline just got rushing having that in my terminal. And of course, instead of the data, they could have found something like this, a ransom note, just asking for money, which is only a joke, of course, because we didn't do this and we wouldn't have done this anyway. But it was still pretty cool that we could have done this, or somebody could have done this. And it's a nice way of proving impact one way or another.
Wow.
Yeah, we have a bit about responsible disclosure, which was indeed it was the biggest challenge, maybe after the challenge of automating mounting the volumes. I think this was the hardest one. So most companies, they didn't have contact details. So we didn't even have an email, right? And what we did, because the companies, at least most of them, they had the website mentioned. So we went to the website, we searched for a contact email, we dropped a generic responsible disclosure email because we didn't know who will read it, right? We wanted to talk details only with the security team, but we got less than 10 responses, which was disappointing. It was a huge effort. Every email was sent manually and separate for each affected company. We had to do some weird things like involving the national cert in one case. I even scheduled a sales meeting with the company just to tell them about the vulnerability. So we did our best, and we had the research done. The article was also done, and we wanted to publish it, but we couldn't do that, knowing that the companies that we identified will be affected once we go public, if someone else will do the same research as we did. And we sent the responsible disclosure, and we waited 90 days, and only 10 AWS keys were invalidated from what we showed. And to give some perspective, the recommended lifespan of AWS access keys is 90 days. So by following best practices, you can actually prevent others to access your account. But there was nothing like this in this case. And yeah, the companies, they are ignoring responsible disclosure, don't have contact details, never rotate access keys, and they they complain AWS is not safe, which is obviously not true. And we didn't know what to do at this point. And we were like, let's try our luck. Let's contact AWS security team, and maybe they can do something, because we were without any other ideas. And actually, they helped a lot. So it was such an amazing collaboration with them that they made us rethink and regain hope in the responsible disclosure process. And only after a few days, more than 60 AWS keys were invalidating, which was a huge success. And we had a meeting with them talking about research, the research fixes. I know that it was weird for them to receive an email that some two random guys, they have access to over 120 AWS users. And I guess they also wanted to see what's the deal with us, but everything was nice. And yeah, I have collaborated with them on another research, and it was a pleasure. And yeah, a huge shout out to them, because they definitely deserve it. Now, we have some recommendations. So there are two settings that you should enable. These are the ones. They should have this green check Also, you can use the CLI command to verify if you have public images, public AMIs, but you must check it on every region. And this is important because attackers, they are making AMIs public so that they can exfiltrate data to their own AWS account. So maybe your developers are not publishing unintentionally AMIs, but maybe an attacker is doing that. So you have to check that. And if you have public AMIs, I recommend looking in CloudTrail for this event, shared snapshot volume created. That doesn't have a lot of information, only contains the account ID that used the AMI, but at least it's something and you can verify if someone accessed your AMI, right? And we had some other ideas because we had a lot of data collected, not only AWS keys, like some JSON web tokens that we checked for various misconfigurations, also private SSH keys that we tried to find the server that had the key deployed there. And we also had a lot of repositories, and some of them are surely private. And we didn't start this yet, but we plan to check what repos are private, find the web application deployed in the wild, and do some source code review to identify vulnerabilities and whatnot.
Cool. Now on the topic of further research. Well, we have 500 gigabytes of potential secrets, and we try our best to look through those, but there's definitely more to find, for sure. Also, our colleague from KPMG Romania, Ștefan Tiță, has done something similar on Azure, and we're definitely looking forward to his results being published as well soon. Also, these days, we're going to share a word list containing the indexes of all the files found on all the AMIs which we scanned. So this could be pretty interesting for anybody who may be looking for further research into this area.
Just to mention that not every file, and Matei knows this, we will not publish files that have like only one occurrence because that's very specific to one environment. We will publish only the files that are present in multiple AMIs just to have some statistics about what file can you expect to find if you are in an EC2 instance.
Well, yes, indeed. If we were looking only for the one occurrence, it could have meant that, yeah, it's very environment specific. But yeah, we try our best to anonymize the data as much as possible. Now, in terms of our research objectives, we definitely touched upon all of them. So we dug for secrets in pretty much every public AMI. Well, not quite all, but the ones which we're interested in. We had loads of fun, and we also responsibly disclosed the issue. It wasn't too fun to do the responsible disclosure, but yeah, shout out to the AWS security team because they were fantastic with this. In terms of conclusions, well, as I said, there's still way more to find. So 500 gigabytes of secrets, we parsed most of that, but there could be more stuff in there in what we've already collected. Also, security by obscurity is definitely insufficient, and I bet many developers thought that their Git repositories were safe because they're private, right? However, how is anything private if it's placed in a public resource? In terms of mass exploitation, well, Eduard and I, we're just two passionate cybersecurity guys from Romania, and we're able to do this. Think about what a threat actor with unlimited resources could do. Also, AMIs are only the peak of the iceberg here. There's way more public cloud resources. There's way more public cloud providers. So this is a very, very interesting area for further research as well. And who knows, maybe Eduard and I will come back next year with something similar, some different public cloud resource. But we also encourage the cybersecurity community in general to get in touch with us if they want to do research in this area, and we'll both be definitely happy to help.
Wonderful. Well, I tell you, it's alarming, but not surprising, if that makes sense. It's alarming because of what we're able to get from the very limited kind of peep into the sea of data, right, that you could have gathered. So it's alarming what you were able to get and what you had access to, especially with the root access. But it's not surprising because a lot of businesses make many assumptions. They assume, oh, Amazon's secure, our stuff's secure. And they don't understand that just
Yeah.
because you are trying to transfer that responsibility, the responsibility is still yours, right? Just
Yeah.
because I have a third party that's supposed to be doing a service for me, whether it's a cloud service, a SOC service, or whatever, as a owner or executive of the company, I'm still on the hook to ensure that my data is protected. That so a lot of companies don't realize that you're well allowed to run your own audits, your own tests, your own scans, against these providers that are doing all these services for you. And so a lot of them lose sight of that because it's a fire and forget. Okay, it's over on the cloud. Amazon is the biggest in the business. We're going to be safe. Or, hey, we're using Azure. Microsoft is the biggest in the business. We're going to be safe. Well, Microsoft had an Achilles heel. They had a third party called CrowdStrike who didn't follow proper patch deployment practices that are long established for rolling out, patches. With the types of AIs and automated source systems or software orchestration systems, they could have had that patch tested 100,000 times in an hour or less, and before deploying it out. They could have did a phased approach to deploying that patch out. But, again, for that particular type of patch, it took down the largest IT outage, global IT outage. And so, big companies can make simple mistakes because companies are still ran by humans. And as humans, we're not perfect and there's going to be mistakes. But just to assume that security is being done, to assume that your best interests are being handled every day, assumptions are the number one killer of any security program, hands down. Because again, as you guys discovered, it's almost like you took one bottle of water out the ocean of data in your research. That's the way I look at it. You took one bottle of water, one cup of water, and this is what you were able to get. Imagine if you had the floodgates open to you, you would have definitely found more. And so, but again, kudos to you guys. I'm glad that it was in your presentation about the ethics and the reporting. And I can only imagine how difficult it was, because if I was a security team member getting an email from, some guy named Eduard and Mateo, I'd be like, I don't know who these guys are. Maybe this is a phishing attempt. Because default, people want to be skeptical and people be like, probably delete. It's probably junk mail. It's not legit. I understand there's probably a mountain to overcome, but I am glad that you guys did get a hold of a few folks. It's not surprising that they didn't take the appropriate action. As you guys said, if they would have just did the industry recommended 90-day rotation of keys, they wouldn't have had this issue, after 90 days. But poor practices, people not following basic security principles and practices, and again, making assumptions. I think about 90% of the problem here and what your research is targeting is a lot of businesses just assume is going to take care of it. They're not. And they're what's called shared responsibility to maintain the security, and they lost sight of that. But again, phenomenal research, you guys. It's folks like you that do this out of passion, and that we need. If only we can just carbon copy, gentlemen like you, and have like a billion plus of you guys in the world. What a secure world we'll have. But unfortunately, not everybody has that DNA of the level of utmost ethics and morals. And again, the passion to do this, because I would have probably sent one email and been like, I'm not doing any more. Most of us wouldn't take the extra steps. And the fact that you guys have ultimately went to the AWS security team and finally got some action and traction, to try to shore up and secure these customers. Wow, again, great work, guys. This is a phenomenal thing you guys have done. So I'm super excited about what else you guys will continue to do in regards to cloud security and other things, because this is, again, really well researched, really, really well executed and planned. Again, wow, I'm color me impressed. You guys, this is definitely
Thanks,
impressive.
Jim.
If we can turn back over the control, if you could set me
Yeah.
as host.
Yeah. I hope I trying that now. Make host, yeah. Before moving forward, if I can add two other things here. So we saw two different the extremes of caring about security, right? It was AWS that helped us solve the misconfiguration of the customers, even if the customers, they were the ones that put themselves in the situation. Yeah. And then we saw something that I really didn't like. We saw outsourcing vendors. Maybe outsourcing is not the right word, but there were development companies that were helping people with small businesses have a website, have some infrastructure in place, and they were the ones that made the client environment unsafe. And that was something that I really didn't like, because it should be your responsibility if you are building software for someone else to make it safe. And I get why the, let's say, final client, the human, right? They didn't understand our email because it wasn't their responsibility. They only wanted a website, right? And they weren't aware of what was behind it. So
You bring a
yeah,
good
definitely.
point. I mean, you trust that you're hiring a professional to do something in a way that's not going to expose you, right? Like you said, a vulnerable product or code. And it's a shame in our profession that there are professionals that'll take shortcuts, that will do it the easy way, and they don't understand that you got to take your game up. You got to step up to the level of, if it can't be done securely, at least make sure the client is aware of the
Right.
vulnerabilities and thoroughly document it and provide it, your warts and all, as I would say. And if they accept it, then they've accepted it. But don't just, and it could also be that the developers aren't aware of, like I said, the basic settings, like you showed in your presentation. Hey, enable these two settings so that you're more secure. There's a lot of people that aren't aware of the things like that. And so again, I really hope that hopefully you guys are publishing papers on this that will go out to industry and be on like AWS's sites and other tech sites that people can get to this information, because every coder, AWS professional out there should be aware of this presentation. So I hope you guys can reach more of the community, because to me, this is some really eye-opening research you guys have done. But again, a lot of information you guys presented, and what I like to do is I like to kind of talk about you guys now, because obviously you shared what I would consider as a bombshell of a revelation about security practices and things not being done right. But I want to kind of like take a step back in time, because people that are watching this podcast are like, these guys are amazing. These guys have strong ethics, strong morals. They're super intelligent. They had persistence to keep following up, because they could have just said, "We're done. We did our part." No, they followed this all the way through to AWS security team. So again, you guys are phenomenal for your tenacity and making sure things were done in the right way. But you guys weren't always like this, right? It takes time to build up your knowledge base and your skills and experience. So if each one of you would like to talk about what was day one when you were younger than you are now, but day one when you said, "I want to work in security, IT, cyber," what was that story like for each of you?
Eduard,
Mateo,
you
would
want to
you
go
like to
first?
start?
Okay, I can start then. I can start. Well, for me, it was pretty early on, to be honest. So, for a bit of context, my grandfather was one of the first robot makers in Romania. He
Oh yeah.
built a painting robot back in the day. So he wanted to make sure that I start programming very, very early. So I think I was 7 years old when I first wrote my first piece of code, probably just printing "Hello World"
Uh-huh.
in C or C++.
What was the system? Was it like basic?
No, no. So at the time we were using Borland C. So
Ah,
that
okay.
was we were programming in. But yeah, afterwards it got pretty interesting to me because over time programming, working with algorithms and all that stuff was fun, but it was not enough. I wanted to be hands on. I want to break things or to understand how things are broken so I can prevent this. So I was probably only 12 when I first decided that I wanted to work in cybersecurity. However, I had no idea how to get there, no idea whatsoever. And that was scary, to be honest. That's why I ended up studying criminology with psychology, because I thought the path was clear. I'll become a programmer, I'll keep going, And being a teenager, which I was at the time, I just said, you know what? No, I'll just change completely. I do something completely different. So I went to study criminology with psychology, which I found very, very interesting. However, at some point, I was doing some research on Romania's police site, trying to see the database of stolen cars and see exactly what days are the most popular for cars being stolen. Funnily enough, the most popular day is Monday. And why, you may ask? Well, it's easy because people are gone on Saturday and Sunday and they report it on Monday. So that's why most reports come in on a Monday. But yeah, that's something I was playing around with. However, the police site didn't have any easy way to parse the database or to download it. So I had to write a web scraper in Python, which I did. However, I forgot to set a timeout or a sleep, a delay. So of course, I put the website down.
You did
I
not know service
did a,
site. Yeah.
yep, I did a denial of service attack on the website without even realizing at the time. And I said, you know what? Let me get back to the technical stuff because I think that is very, very interesting. So I decided to do a master's in cybercrime and intelligence, which is still not 100% technical. It's going to the social side of why people do uh, crime in cyberspace. What is actually crime in cyberspace? And that's when I realized again that compared to my peers and even some of the lecturers, I'm actually quite technical. Um, I was studying in the UK at that time. COVID hit, and everything changed. So I said, okay, you know what? Let me reprioritize. Let me go back to Romania. Came to Romania, and within a month or two, I got a job in Vodafone as a vulnerability analyst. So just scanning for vulnerabilities. I shortly used my automation skills to automate most of my work, became team leader of that team within 8 months, and that's where it all started.
Awesome. Awesome. One of the things you said that I really liked was that in your early days of trying to work with Python, and then of course it's very exact, right? And so, like you say, if you don't specify something, it will run for infinity, right? And so, it's very easy when you're working with scripts and coding where you can create a denial of service issue like that. So that was pretty humorous.
For sure.
But I mean, everybody gets to start from somewhere. So before we move to Edward for his story, in your journey, what would be like some websites that you would recommend in particular for if someone said, "Hey, how do I get started learning about coding, learning about cybersecurity?" What would be some resources that you would recommend, Matai? And then I'll have Edward, when he tells his story, share his sites.
Fantastic. So there's a plethora of resources online, and to be completely honest, there's too many. There's so much that you don't even know where to start from. What worked for me at the beginning was Try Hack Me. Try Hack Me was a fantastic resource for me. Then I moved on to Hack the Box as well. Although at the beginning, some things on Hack the Box were too advanced for me. I was trying to hack into an easy box for days, and it was exhausting, and it sort of hit my confidence a bit at some point. But then over time, I started liking Hack the Box quite a lot as well.
Hack the
But
Box is
then,
kind of like the what's it, the Demon Souls? What's the game that was like near impossible to beat? Yeah.
well,
So
the thing with Hack the Box is that it's definitely a learned skill. It doesn't it definitely helps, but if you get very very good at these sort of CTFs, it's not necessarily that you'll become a better hacker. So being very, very good at CTFs doesn't really mean that you're a fantastic hacker. And being a fantastic hacker doesn't really mean that you'll be fantastic at CTFs for sure. Now, if people prefer videos and stuff like that, John Hammond was absolutely great for me. Very inspiring. Loved his content and still do. IPSEC, absolutely great, and many others, Hackersploit, and I could go on and on and on.
Oh, well, you already mentioned Hammond. That's a great, I call it YouTube University. So guys, just look up John Hammond. Lots of great content. Well, let's move over to Edward. Edward, what was day one of your decision and the story behind you, moving into this career?
Yeah, it was a bit random. So 8 years ago, I saw the movie about Edward Snowden and how he exposed what the American government was doing in terms of collecting data, and it piqued my interest. And after I finished the movie, I went to Google and I searched some of the tools he mentioned. And I started reading about them. And I was like, man, this is interesting. And I wanted to learn more about hacking, right? And I think the same day I got a free ethical hacking course, and I just started doing it. And man, I was hooked. From that moment on, I was hooked. So um, I loved everything about hacking. It felt like that's where my career I wanted to be, and it took me a while to get my first job in cybersecurity. Um, so 8 years ago, I started learning and doing courses. In the meantime, I got hired as a web developer, but then I started doing cybersecurity master degree. And in the meantime, I was also doing a lot of CTFs, a lot of try hack me, just to get that first job. I knew I wanted to be a penetration tester, but at some point, I became desperate. I wanted anything that has to do with security just to get in the field and later move on to pen testing. And only so after 3 4 years of learning a lot, I managed to get my first job as a penetration tester at KPMG Romania. But it was hard. I mean, and it took a lot of time, and I even lost some of my social skills. I was a lot at the keyboard, so definitely came with some compromises. But in the end, I would say it was worth it. And for anyone out there that is at the beginning, if you really want this, just don't give up, because at some point you'll get in the industry, and you'll be with
So
us here.
Edward, when you watch this video again, and during the part where you say, that's kind of where I wanted to be, kind of, I think you meant to say you found your purpose, right? When you're
Yeah,
saying that, your face beams. It truly, like, a look of joy beams across your face. So when you do watch it again, look for that, because I was like, wow, yeah, this guy, so lucky when you find your purpose, right? When you
yeah,
find that this is what I'm here to do for a career, and hey, it's great to earn money while doing something that you are passionate about. A lot of people in this life, they go get their degree, they go work this job, and they don't like their job. They don't really like their lives because they're not fulfilling a purpose. How blessed to be able to find your purpose and still be young, to still build
yeah,
all the other things. The social stuff, you can always get back out there in the
yeah,
social world, but you've now established yourself into a great career. And again, you've been to
yeah,
Defcon, man. You've been to the Super Bowl. So
yeah,
you guys have, that's a great accomplishment. And I'm looking forward to you guys going back again and again, because again, the work you're doing is commendable and tremendous. So with all that being said, we talked about your tenacity and persistence in contacting these owners and so forth. Something's got to drive you, right? Love and passion, yeah, it goes only so far, but what are some that motivates you guys? I mean, besides just, we really want to help and make things more secure, what is really what's inside of you that's not inside of the rest of this world of security? So besides passion, so you can't use passion. What motivates and drives you?
Uh, for me is curiosity, and also some kind of competition, mostly with myself. But I I got to a point where I feel like I'm somewhere at the top, not the first one, but I'm among the best. I know it sounds a bit weird to
No, no,
say
no.
that, but
I
No, you
trust me. I
are.
understand what you're saying.
yeah, and I just want to go for more. I want to see what's out there, and I'm at a point where it's hard to find things to learn from other people because you are at the same level. And I kind of want to push the boundaries even further. And that's why I'm doing research, because I find new things. No one is talking about them on the internet. And it's me that I got to talk about it, to teach others. And it's amazing to share your knowledge with the community, right? It's the same thing that it's how we learn, right? We learn from others, and now we have the opportunity to share a bit of from our knowledge with the community, and that feels amazing. So that's mostly what drives me in this career.
Okay. Mateo?
Right. For me, there's a positive and a negative. So the positive, well, honestly, my wife motivates me mostly. She's always with me with anything, even stuff related to cyber, and she just started in cybersecurity as well. And she basically started thanks to me because she saw my passion and my love for this field. She said, "Hey, look, this is interesting." So I definitely felt that I want to share this passion, and it's my duty to share this passion with people. Now, the negative would be perhaps my fear of unachieved potential. I get the feeling that I do have some skills, I do have some knowledge, maybe some talent, and I think it is my duty to make the best out of these. So I always keep running, always keep learning, always keep trying to better myself. Sort of going back to Eduard's point of being in competition with yourself. I just want to make sure I I am able to achieve my potential and do make the best out of what I have at the moment.
Well, gentlemen, I'll share a little bit of myself because in both your answers, I was like, wow, I completely understand where you guys are coming from, your perspective. Back in my about early mid to 30s, I, pretty much had accumulated all these certifications. And what it was for me was it was about, let's say the organization I was working for was about to do a cloud migration, right? So I would go like CSA Alliance, the Cloud Security Alliance, and study up on their documentation, and then I would read FedRAMP documentation. Then I'd go get the certifications that were associated to that body of knowledge. So if I was working on like a continuity operations plan or a disaster recovery plan, I would then go got my concentration ISSMP, and I would start just every time there was some new project or new term that the organization I was working for was looking at or wanted more information on, I took it upon myself to learn everything about it. Now, was it required for my job? No. Did I get a raise or any more money? No. And a lot of my colleagues is like, why you got another cert? Why do you have GPen? You're not in a pen tester role. It's like, because I have the knowledge of how to do it. But if I ever went back to doing audits, it's a very important, skill set to have. And it just reaffirms the body of knowledge for me. So yes, I call it for myself is that I'm a perpetual student, and that I'm never, even though I'm considered a multi-domain expert by industry, I still personally, like when you said you're in competition with yourself, I consider myself a perpetual student where I'm always learning. Every day I'm learning something new. Like today I learned all this new information from you guys, and then that'll be something that I could share this video to other people saying, hey, your business is working AWS, watch this video. These guys have some information and you may want to reach out to them to get more information because you could be at risk and don't know it. But it's things like that, like the collaboration that you mentioned about, we all have to share information, we all learn from each other. And then I do feel when you said, Edward, you mentioned that, you feel that you've learned as of today, you've learned everything from your peers and colleagues. So you find yourself like, you look at your colleagues like you're above them knowledge wise. And now you're like, where's next? Who's the next mentor or person that I can learn from? And but having that realization that, what, research, let me keep researching and staying at the forefront of security. That is a wonderful place to be, right? It's like I said earlier, if we only could clone you guys and have about a million plus of you. But again, I really want to emphasize anyone watching, even watching right to this point of the video, if you're still watching this, there's something that you got to understand. Going back to the work that the research that these guys done, they did mention that they didn't have the resources like millions of dollars in budget. They didn't have a team of like 100+ analysts and people working for them and under them on this project. It's just these two guys, just this dynamic duo right here, where countries like Syria, North Korea, I would say Georgia, a lot of the former Soviet countries, or well, Romania, some of the top hackers in the world, developers and hackers in the world are in Europe. I think the last list that came out, I think Georgia was like number one, Estonia number two. So like Estonia, that years ago they did the whole programming and coding and primary school program, right? And so I think it was 6 years ago that first class graduated. So, we're still going to see continued what I call a digital disruption with businesses in the EU, because those Estonians will go to different countries and work as developers. But hopefully they're developers that are doing secure settings like Edward was talking about, and not just leaving these companies exposed. But the EU, a lot of people, when they think Silicon Valley, they think, California, Silicon Valley, San Francisco, where all the bigs are. But they don't understand some of the top hackers, pen testers, and developers are in Europe. And again, Romania, Georgia, not Georgia stateside, guys. This is Georgia, the country in Europe, Estonia, Latvia, all of these countries, Poland even. But like I said, I probably put Poland number 9 on the list if I was ranking them. But definitely Romania, Estonia, and Georgia, they're in the top 5, hands down. People used to think because of the 80s and all those old hacker movies that, oh, Russian hackers are at the top. Russia is not at the top of they're not in the top 5 discussion when it comes to nations that have the propensity or the number of highly skilled hackers. And the only nation state I would throw up in the top 5 is China, simply because of the sheer volume, and knowledge is power when it comes to that. And they have budgets and they have systems. They have hundreds of supercomputers that their teams can have access to. So talking about a multi-tiered attack, they can do it. Whereas, but again, guys, thanks for sharing a lot of questions. So I want to kind of do a little levity to our podcast discussion so far. I do what I call a speed round of questions, where I ask 2 or 3 questions, and it's whatever answer comes to your mind. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just for fun. So this is the moment where we can just take a breather, like, okay, we're not had to talk technical stuff for a minute. So my first question, you guys, again, no right or wrong answer: is a hot dog a sandwich? So Edward.
No.
Mateo.
I think it is.
It's
I'd
a
say it is.
sandwich. Okay, all right, we split on that one.
And you know what? Pizza is a sandwich as well.
So you're going to say pizza's
Oh my
also
God.
a sandwich? Okay. If you put a piece of bread on one side of the planet, one on the other, the Earth becomes a sandwich, right?
For sure. For sure.
All right, here's the next question. We're gonna keep it going. Cake or pie?
Cake.
Cake?
No, pie.
Pie.
I
Oh,
changed my
split decision on this one too. Okay, here's a good one. This splits the tech community. All right, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Yeah,
Star
I think
Wars?
Star Wars as well. Star Wars as well.
All
Yeah.
right. Cool. Guys, what is the favorite book of yours that you've read, whether it's tech or fantasy, fiction, nonfiction? But what's a favorite book that you've read, maybe as a child or recently?
Want to go
Last
first,
year.
Eduard?
Yeah, sure. I already have my answer. Last year I read Pegasus. So it's the book about Pegasus, the spyware, the mobile spyware, but I can't remember the authors. It's very well written, and I also liked how they put in perspective the dangers on each individual that is fighting for themselves against maybe a corrupt government, and how they can be targeted, and the huge impact this kind of spyware can have on each one of us. And the book really stayed with me even to this day.
Cool. I'll make sure I look up that book, and I'll put a link in the description. So for anyone that would like to get that book, I'll make sure I have that. Mateo?
Cool. Recently, I've been reading The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene.
Excellent book.
And that's a pretty easy read as well. And it's very, very interesting. Very interesting stuff in there. Definitely shows you how people tended to use various strategies to maintain and grow power throughout history.
Mm-hmm. What's interesting for me, I had to reread The Art of War by Sun Tzu recently, because I started working on a book called The Art of War and Cybersecurity back in 2017, and I never finished the book. And this month, I'm actually going to finish the draft and hopefully have it published by early next month. But what I did was, I take the lessons and strategies from The Art of War and apply it to cybersecurity, and I provide use cases of different breaches or attacks or hacks where, had they applied these measures, they could have prevented. But another thing you guys talked about the frustration when you would, and I'm going back to the earlier discussion because again, it's just fascinating about how, it was upsetting that even after you alerted these companies that had engagement to talk to them, ensure that you've handed off the information that they needed, that 30 days later, like with the subscription thing, when you had to go back and find out that they didn't switch the keys, they didn't do nothing, and it was really upsetting. And then you just mentioned about Pegasus and the whole spyware stuff on the mobile devices. You mentioned Edward Snowden also as well. People, when the Edward Snowden revelations came out, you would have thought that the American society, at least 500, well, if we had about 300 plus million people, at least 100 million people in America would rise up and protest. But largely, no one cared. It was like and then of course everybody, the media, the government, everybody branded him a traitor to the United States, and that he risked the lives of so many operatives and agents and da 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 da. And the thing is, the American people didn't really I don't think they truly understood the situation of the wholesale eavesdropping on their communications, and they didn't understand what really privacy means. And then there was an article I read early on during that most of the articles was anti-Snowden, right? A lot of media was attacking him, but there was one gentleman, a privacy researcher, and I forget his name right now. If I find it, I'll put it in the description. But I remember he talked about why privacy should matter to everyone, and in his example, and it was a really good example. But he was saying, let's say you hear about a acquaintance or a colleague or someone in your company that's got like a rare form of cancer, and then you Google it because you're like, I've never heard of that. You do, curious, you Google it. Now that's in your Google search, and that information is stored on a server. And let's say that information is also shared with insurance companies. And then all of a sudden, let's say one day you don't go to your normal Starbucks because there's construction traffic. You decide to go to this other Starbucks that you've never been to, but it's kind of rerouted on your way to work. And it happens to be within a block or two of a cancer treatment center. And all of a sudden, they will think that you didn't disclose this. You just, went to a private clinic, paid out of pocket for a test, and they could potentially drop your coverage. Very plausible and realistic scenario that could happen. But until it happens to you, most people don't think what privacy means. But he made it even simpler. And what he said was, he said, well, when you have a house, you have windows in your house, you have blinds, right? Curtains and blinds. Yeah. Well, you care about your privacy. You have a fence around your backyard. You care about your privacy. You wouldn't want to just have everybody in public view looking in on what you're doing in your house. You have doors. You shut your door. You value privacy, but only when it comes to the intimate parts of you. When you think of like your socials, you think about everything else in your life. Most people will say, well, if I'm not breaking the law or doing anything wrong, what do I got to worry about? But they don't understand that with all of this data points and all of this context, how it can be also used against you. That it can compromise you. It could be not just from like the typical like stolen identities. It could be used to map your movements, so that if someone wanted to break in your house, they could track your movements. Your social media, posting your own vacation while you're on vacation. People know, okay, where do they live? And they go come rob you, right? There's so many instances where privacy should matter more to people, but they essentially, at the end of the day, 9 out of 10 people don't care. And that's what I think you guys faced, even within security teams and stakeholders that are supposed to care. They just didn't care. Mateo, you was talking about how you did your early studies in criminology and human psychology. I believe that's very key in security, is the psychology of what people perceive and believe is important, because when you have to realize what your threats are, right? And if you have, we could talk about fear bias, which makes people spend money and focus on areas of security that really doesn't matter, and then neglect the things that do, or just by their perception of, with their psychology, different professionals may treat things differently. And so, when we're now in a world where CBAC, which is context-based access control, is becoming one of the main bedrocks of zero trust architecture, which is the new buzzword that everybody thinks is going to be their savior from future attacks. But what people don't understand is that every security framework, when you use the word framework, it's a frame of a house. It's just a frame. What you put on the walls, what type of lock you put on the doors, what windows you buy, all the pieces that fit in the house is your defense in depth. But people don't understand that, because most frameworks are only working with the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, availability. And since I think 2014, I've been presenting a security paper. And so Don Parker had identified the 9 core security principles. And when I talk to most professionals, they're just barely struggling with the 3. And I tell them there's another 6. And those 6 are where the last 15 plus years of data breaches have come from, the other 6 principles, not from the triad. And all of our frameworks, they may talk about, like, we have multi-factor authentication, that's one of the 6. We have data loss prevention, which is to protect against the risk of possession. But then there's other ones, when we still talk about DDoS, denial of service attacks, we're talking utility at that point. There's a lot of gaps in so many programs. And so when you talk about psychology, people can do what they call, no, that can't happen to me, right? Oh, that just happens to that company or that company. It won't happen here. And that kind of blinders or short-sightedness from their own perspective. And that's where psychology comes to play. They need to understand that if it happens to Microsoft, it happens to NSA field offices, FBI offices, it's happened to all organizations at various levels that we assume have the top tier security programs. If it can happen to them, it can happen to you. And what gets
Right.
even more dangerous is there's not a lot of people looking out for the small to medium businesses either. And they're at more risk than ever because they don't have security budgets. They don't have SOC teams and security managers, or even, a CIO, CTO, CSO, CISO. They don't have all these expansive roles because they don't have the budget for it. It might be a mom and pop sole proprietor plumber, and he's just trusting his stuff is going to be safe in the cloud, and he doesn't know. And for a big company, let's say like CrowdStrike or Microsoft, they could survive a civil suit of, 300, $400 million. They could survive that. They're going to still be okay. But a plumber gets compromised, and he loses, like, what you guys found, 31,000 in that one account. If
Yep.
that was a plumber's account, that could be his total life savings, right? His business would just cease to exist. And that's the kind of risk that people don't understand. They say, oh, well, that's only 31,000. Well, yeah, to a Fortune 500, that might not be a big deal. But the small, medium business, that can end your business. So that's why this matters. The research you guys are doing, it matters because it's critical to these organizations that don't have immense budgets and don't have the teams. So before we wrap up, guys, I want to give you an opportunity to, if people are watching this and say, hey, I really like Eduard and Mateo, how do I follow these guys? What is your social? What do you prefer people to connect and follow you on? And is there any personal projects that you're working on? I know you mentioned your business, but if you want to shout out your business again, you're welcome to. But any other nonprofit work or any other personal projects that you want to share with us? So, Mateo, do you want to go first?
Sure thing. So first thing first, before any sort of personal shout outs, I'd like to thank the KPMG Romania team again, because, well, they did offer us the budget, but also the time for this piece of research. And honestly, the whole team had to put up with us being involved in research while they were doing actual work. So definitely big shout out to that team there. Other than that, people can find me on LinkedIn. That's where I'm the most active, Matei Anthony Josephs. I tend to be fairly active on LinkedIn. Also, our company, you can find that there as well, HiveHack. Other than that, what can I say? I'm working on some research right now, trying to focus on eye tracking technologies. I'm trying to see exactly where people are looking when trying to recognize deep fakes and also phishing sites or emails. So hopefully within the next year, I'll get some research published in this area.
Well, Mateo, when you do come to a conclusion on the eye tracking research, I would love to have you back on when you're ready to speak of that, because that's really interesting when you're talking about the detecting deepfakes. So I'd love to hear more on that.
Sure thing.
Eduard?
So people can connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have a Twitter, but I'm more active on LinkedIn. I also have a blog I recently published with a new research. The blog is called hacktodef.com.
I like it.
So yeah, so I noticed that defenders, they are amazing people, but if they lack the offensive mindset, then they can't um, fully protect their environments, right? And the mission with this blog is to show defenders how attackers are thinking, how is the offensive mindset, how they are working, so that they can anticipate the attacker's movement when they are trying to set a defensive perimeter. So That's the blog, that's the mission. And I also have a small, let's say, business, but it's for Romanians, and I'm trying to help people recover their social media accounts. I'm also offering free of charge consultancy to people that were abused online. I was looking in Romania, and I noticed that there are a lot of companies that help other companies, but there is no one helping the people that are having the most impact on their lives when they are hacked. And I started this website. It's called allsec.ro, but obviously it's everything in Romania because in Romanian because that's the community I'm trying to help. But definitely, if someone is watching and they've been the victim of an online abuse, feel free to reach out to me. I'm more than happy to help.
Well, kudos to you for doing that, the helping people, not just businesses and companies. That's very admirable of you. I do want to add, when these gentlemen are talking about try hack me, hack the box, and all these resources, and Edward just mentioned something about the offensive perspective. When you're learning and auditing or pen testing, you have to consider, the books will teach you about white box, gray box, black box testing, but there's another perspective that's even at a higher concept level, but it's important, is the external and internal views of a network, right? And so looking at it from the perspective, how do I break in? Or if I'm already in, how can I move laterally without detection? And how much damage could I do? Or how much data can I exfil? And there's a lot of discussions on the exfil part because a lot of people think they're just going to come in and just move 100 gigs of data. No, they're smarter than this. Their systems will monitor, do reconnaissance, understand how, like, let's say you have a night shift and they're only doing about 2 to 3 gigs of traffic night. Their systems will gauge that and they will mimic that traffic. They will, the sophistication that's at play at a lot of hacker groups are much more sophisticated than people think. They think it's going to be like the big guy running in the room with an axe, the axe murderer. That's not how they come in your networks. They come in your networks. They look like your partners and customers. They can masquerade, mimic accounts. There's so many tactics. So what I advise people that want to learn more, it's not a perfect system to learn, but it's at least free to the public, and it's called the MITRE attack framework, where you can actually learn about the tactics and techniques, particularly of APTs, and my brain just drew a blank, but it's persistent threats. I think it's advanced persistent threats.
Advanced persistent threats, yeah.
And so you can learn about APTs or techniques and tactics and how they will try to get into your network and so forth. Is it perfect? No. There's a lot of people in the industry right now that will call out certain issues, like they don't do enough for cloud, which there is a thing called caveat by MITRE, which is working towards filling that gap where it doesn't address cloud appropriately, and then other programs around it as well. So I won't go into all of those, but you could look up on MITRE. It's at least a good start. And then ultimately, I advise for a lot of people just to, just start reading everything, take in and ingest as much information, because the more information you have, the better perspective that you'll have into what you're trying to do and accomplish in your career, your projects, your challenges. Well, gentlemen, again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing the presentation. Again, I can see why you guys were invited to Defcon. That is very great research you've done. Very solid work. Again, we wish we had more professionals of your guys' caliber. So again, thank you so much. I will make sure I take any of the URLs that we discussed, and as well as their LinkedIn profile links. They'll be in the description below. So please connect to these guys. They're doing great work in the industry. Follow their careers, because this is just the start. So, you mentioned earlier, you're still on, climbing up the Mount Everest of security, but you guys are already, beyond the summit. And so keep going, keep doing the great work you guys do. And at any time you want to come back on the podcast, you have an open invitation. So thank you, gentlemen.
Appreciate it, Tim. Thank you so much.